Well, good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Um, I normally have a deep voice, but at the moment it seems deeper than average because I seem to have a bit of a something going on my neck here. So yeah, please excuse me if I sound a bit croaky. Anyway, my name is. Let me get my slides up. There we go. So my name is Joanne Lockwood, and I am the inclusive culture expert, and I work with organisations throughout the UK, Europe, and further afield, promoting a culture of inclusion. And as Lauren said, we've known each other, I don't know, it's probably 2017, 2018. I think we first met on a stage somewhere in deepest, darkest Swindon, if I remember rightly. Got probably lost in the roundabouts. Uh, so here I'm going to talk about a bit about inclusive menopause support and dot 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 for every gender. So as a trans woman myself, my experience of menopause is limited. But I have experience of HRT, and I'm also married, and I have been married for 37 years and a week and 2 weeks. So yeah, quite a long time. And I've had experience secondhand of menopause through my wife's journey over the last 20 odd years, I guess it must be. So whilst I have empathy for her, I obviously don't have her lived experience. So I'm not clinical, I'm not medical. My expertise on this is being trans, being on HRT. So I do have experience of doing the dance with my gel on my thighs every morning, and understand the impact of withdrawal of estrogen on my endocrine system if it drops off. So I get twitchy and panicky when there's shortages, and I'm busily finding a pharmacy that can provide my hit, if you like. So I take testosterone blockers, and I have estrogen supplements. That's kind of my HRT position, and so that gives me some perspective. But today I want to talk about how we can think or be consciously inclusive of people who aren't fitting into the traditional box of gender. And menopause, periods, menstruation tend to be coded around cis, i.e., non-trans women's identities, and I just want to shine a perspective on other identities and the intersection and cross section of how they interact with each other. Okay, that's the mission. Right, here we go. So let's start with the why. Why does it matter? Why, without getting all woke, without getting all kind of politically correct, why does it really matter? Because I often think when we're trying to implement change or implement making a difference, we have to understand what our own why is, because it's very easy to do it because it's the right thing to do, because someone tells us to, it's trendy, everyone else is doing it, or it's a marketing opportunity. Whatever your why is, that's great, but I think you just have to understand what that why. And for me, the output is positive people experiences. That's what I'm trying to create. Whether it's DEI, JB, justice, belonging, equity, equality, whatever you're trying to portray in the world, the outcome is positive people experiences. And I'm thinking here for people who have need of your care, your support, your advice, your mentoring, whatever it may be, you want them to have a positive experience of that interaction with you. So, and I'm going to give you some ideas today of how you can maybe be inclusive in your language, recognize, avoid making assumptions, understand some of the parameters and challenges that some people may face that you may not have come to. So I'm here really to try and not blow your mind, but expand your mind to encourage you to think about different things in a different way. So that's the purpose today, okay? So let's talk about the who, the what, and the how. So I keep looking over this way, but my head goes that way because that's where my screens are. But so let's think about the different trans identities. Who are the trans people we're talking about? And that's what we're going to focus on. Who are we talking about here? So someone who's transmasculine, and let me explain some terminology for you. So transmasculine, someone who's assigned female at birth. So what does that mean? It means the doctor picked them up by the ankles, had a quick look and went, oh, this person hasn't got a penis. They must be a woman. They must be a girl. And someone who's trans feminine, is someone who's picked up by the ankles at birth, and doctor went, oh, this little person's got a penis. They must be a boy. So assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth. So someone who's transmasculine was assigned female, i.e., no penis, and decided that the person was a girl. And transfeminine has a penis, decided they were a boy, but actually their identity was such that they were a girl all along. Someone who's non-binary. I often describe someone who's non-binary as being kind of gender agnostic. They don't subscribe to the BS or the social construct of gender. They're not in the middle or halfway. They step out completely. So they're not male, they're not female. They don't subscribe to that at all. So they're completely agnostic to the concept of gender. And there are people who are gender fluid. They wax and wane between maybe a masculine persona, a feminine persona, or even an androgynous non-binary persona. So their identity can flux depending on their role, depending on what they're doing, just how they wake up today. Sometimes it's enforced. Sometimes the person themselves may be forced into conforming as a parent. Maybe they have to be mum, they have to be dad for their family. There's either coercive control or just personal responsibility, or maybe they can't come out at work, but they can in their private life. So sometimes people are fluid because of societal and social constructs they have to conform to. So if we think about these different identities, that obviously you're well aware there are various shades. These are spectrums. People fit on different elements here, but effectively what we'll talk about here is people assigned female at birth who are transmasculine, people assigned male at birth who are transfeminine, who take HRT, people who are non-binary, who could be male at birth or female at birth. So there are many non-binary people who are assigned female at birth and who are assigned male. Excuse me. And gender fluid could be, again, both ways there. So let's think about the next element, the complexities, the multifacetedness. So if we think about those, what did I say, 4 identities I just came up with there. Let's think about some of the multifacets that another dimension, if you like. So we just think about that being the first dimension. Let's think about the additional dimension. So let's add into that age. So people are going to have a different age, right from 6, 7 years old, and they may well be assigned puberty blockers. I appreciate that's quite tricky at the moment with various laws and legislation, the cash report, the change to the NHS in the UK, and some of the rhetoric going on in the US and other parts of the world. Puberty blockers are becoming extremely more restricted. Whole trans youth, trans children, their whole the support networks that are there are currently under review in a lot of cases. So you may find there are people of a younger age who were on puberty blockers or on cross-sex hormones in their earlier years, and now they can't get hold of them. They're being denied access. Obviously, I mentioned sex assigned at birth, how people were assigned when they're born. So that's one dimension. Cross-sex hormones, estrogen. I have estrogen gel on a daily basis. But there are people who are maybe trans masculine who take testosterone to increase their male features, deepen their voice. Sometimes they'll lose their hair. Sometimes their periods will stop. Sometimes that through the testosterone, other changes may well occur as well. Estrogen, as we know, will help develop breast tissue, soften the skin. It won't change voice once your voice is broken. Hormones can't reverse that, but it will remove certain hair growth from various parts of the body. So estrogen has a feminizing effect. Testosterone has a masculinizing effect. And again, these are hormones that occur naturally, but they're being supplemented through HRT. Then there are some trans people, non-binary people, who may have surgical intervention. So for a trans feminine person, that may include breast augmentation. So cross-sex hormones, HRT can only do so much to develop breast tissue, and some people may feel they need augmentation, fat transfer, implants, whatever that may be. Some people may choose to have a neo-vagina created, so they have their penis removed or turned inside out, and a neo-vagina or a vulvoplasty, so just a cosmetic outie, if you like, just the labia and the vulva. So that can occur. And there's other things like Brazilian bum lifts and all the other kind of things we all like to do to our body, Botox injections, lip fillers, all the things every woman aspires to having the perfect face, and trans people are no different. I personally, I've had other things like I've had hair transplants. I've had 2 hair transplants. I've had my head shaved twice, which is quite a challenge. I've also had my face lasered and the hair removed, and so lots of other things going on there. So it's not just the sort of big surgical things. There are other things that people are doing as well. And then there's legal gender reassignment. In the UK, we call it a gender recognition certificate. Also, we maybe change our identity through passports, driving licenses, HMRC, NHS records, all those kind of things. So there's the legal side, so if we had all these things together, we've got the 4 identities, and each one of those 4 different characteristics, transmasculine, transfeminine, non-binary, and gender fluid, can all have a different sex assigned at birth, can all be on various levels of cross-sex hormones or not, may not have had surgery, may have had surgery, may not have legally assigned their gender, may be on puberty blockers or not, or be a different age. So you can see there's already starting to build up another dimension to those identities. So when you're coming across people trying to support people, you can't make the assumption that everyone's going to have the same experience. It's likely that everyone is actually going to have a unique experience, as we could probably guess. But these are some of the complexities. Let's think about some more complexities as we go through this. Not everyone's going to share with you. I know many transmasculine people assigned female at birth who are still likely to be going through menstrual cycles, potentially perimenopause, even menopause. They may not want to share that fact. They may be embarrassed to engage with your support, your services, if you're heavily marketing yourself towards a binary feminine type marketing brand. They will not see it as for them. They will look at you and say, hang on a minute, you're pushing this into the pink and fluffy, not the androgynous, not the masculine. So again, when you think about your services, how do you create inclusive language so that everybody feels they're included? And I'm certainly not one of these people that wants you to erase the word woman, wants you to erase the word mother, because that's sometimes we hear this in the press, in the right-wing media, the Daily Mail, front page, whatever it may be. Trans people are trying to erase the word mother. We want to be birth givers and chest feeders. That's not the motivation. What we want to try and do is what I would call additive language. So mothers and people who give birth, not or othering people as such. It's about inclusive language. So we're adding words to the phrases. And if you can describe it maybe without using gender, without using some of these terms, but without creating this strange language. If you just say, I'm providing advice on menopause and perimenopause for people who are going through that stage of life, you haven't mentioned gender there, you haven't mentioned anything, and you've been very inclusive by describing what you're doing, not who it's for. And then people can self-serve if they identify and say, well, actually, that sounds like me. I'm going through perimenopause. I don't want to call it that, but that's what it is. I want to talk to you. So again, it's thinking about the language you're going to be doing. And of course, the disparity of experience. People are engaging in various services, the NHS, other, if you like, medical, professional environments. And the experience people are receiving is different, it's variable. We think about the primary care, the GP network. Not every GP feels competent to engage in these conversations. And speaking from my wife's experience that I've been sharing with her own GP isn't great at engaging. I get more hormone blood tests than she will ever do. I get once a year. They're checking my hormone levels, my estrogen, my free testosterone, all these various levels. I get these checked once a year. My wife and most women who are going through perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopausal have absolutely no idea about their bloods and their levels and their hormones. So there's a complete disparity of experience here about what support people are getting through primary care or even secondary care. So we think about all these different permutations. We've got the 4 at the beginning, then we added on the other things, and then we've now got this disparity of experience. But fundamentally, there's a lack of trust. We look at what's going on in the world, look at what's going on in the media, what's going on in the government, this side of the pond, the other side of the pond, and actually most places in the world, there's a huge lack of trust that trans people find in the establishment, in the medical profession, because the expertise isn't there. You assume that people know what they're talking about, and generally they don't. So hopefully we can upskill you a little bit here and sort of give you some of the ideas about how we can build that trust by making sure we're not using either the wrong language or overtly gendered language that doesn't fit someone's definition. And all you end up doing is pushing them away or saying, actually, that's not for me. Okay, so that's the identities, the who, the what, and now we've got the, where has it gone? There's it, the how, the holistic approach. How we can be more holistic in our approach when we're dealing with people. Okay, these seem to be going really slow, changing slide. Okay, let's click on that instead. So I talked at the beginning about positive people experiences. And the key here is inclusion at the heart. How can I make you feel included? And I use that word feel very deliberately because I believe that inclusion, belonging are feelings. I feel included. It's a bit like when I walk into my favourite coffee shop. I feel that place is for me. I feel that sense of belonging. It resonates. I also know if I go, my favourite coffee shop is there's a Costa in town, and I know right at the back there's this sofa, and you can sit in that sofa with your cup of decaf latte, cuddle that for a couple of hours. You can sit there and you can people watch out the window. You can see the traffic go by. You can see everyone coming in, and I just know I get sitting there. It's comfy. I know I belong there. But if I go to Cafe Nero around the corner, it's just not the same. It's not the same. The couch is uncomfy, no view, don't like their beans. Yeah, it doesn't work for me. So I know instantly when I feel something, I feel included. If it resonates, it's somewhere for me. And if you're old enough to remember the American or the Canadian sitcom Cheers, it's a bar where everyone knows your name and even the song resonates. So we've got to try and create this sense of inclusion, this sense of belonging, this feeling in people that you are for them and they are for you. Because that's where the perfect symbiotic relationship occurs, where you both trust each other and you feel part of it. So some of the things I put on the screen there. See the unseen. Understand that what that person's going through. Use the right amount of empathy, the right amount of compassion. Understand that their needs aren't always the same. Reflect the language that matters to them. And if you're not sure, you can ask. Lead with your pronouns. Put your pronouns on your Zoom, on your LinkedIn, other places, so that people know that you are receptive and understanding of the need to share that. So why does that matter? Let me give you a why. You've probably seen people with pride lanyards. NHS do it a lot. They wear their badge. You see pubs, you see cafes with rainbow stickers in there. You see people supporting pride. Why does that matter? Because it shows that that organisation is aware that being queer, being trans, being gay, whatever it may be, is not the default. And oppression, marginalisation, discrimination all occur in wherever you are when you are not the default, when you're not the majority. So by sharing pronouns, being an advocate, being an open ally, sharing information, talking in an inclusive way, what you're doing is you're putting your rainbow sticker, if you like, your trans flag, in the window of your cafe, saying, if you come here, you're going to feel belonging. I recognise who you are. I know how to include you. The language I'll use is going to be inclusive, and you will feel that I understand and want to deal with you. That's what you're saying. And if you're not ready to live up to that, then now's the opportunity to say, actually, if I want to put that flag in the window, there's some work I have to do first. And that's, again, why we're here today, to try and learn how to put that flag in the window. Listen to needs. Again, someone may not be comfortable opening up. Again, if we're trying to, I'm going to use the phrase here, help people who have a womb, going through peri, post, or menopause itself, endometriosis, whatever else you're helping with. Listen to the needs in non-judgmental, very open language, respecting the fact the person sitting in front of you may well have been taking testosterone for years. They may well have a beard. They may well have been losing a lot of their head on their hair. They may well have muscles. Their voice will be really deep, deeper than mine probably. So you may find it really, really weird, for want of a better word, having a conversation about periods, about menstruation, about HRT, and all these other things with a person who sat in front of you who you perceive to be a man. So you've got to be careful you're not misgendering that person. You're not using female coded language. You're treating them as a man who also has a need for your support around menopause. Think about the packaging. Most period products, menopause conversations are kind of defaulted pink and fluffy. They're feminine coded, and we've got to recognise that people who are transmasculine, even non-binary, are not going to want to engage with your services if everything is very, very overtly female coded. So again, it's trying to find those two sets of language where we're not excluding the majority, we're not excluding women, people who are traditionally included in the services, but we're creating this additive language here to say, how can my services be demonstrably inclusive? And maybe you need to have two posters, two brands. One that says quite clearly on the front of the tin for women of a certain age or a certain stage, and one is for people of a certain stage who menstruate or who go through HRT or whatever it may be. And maybe you need to have different branding, and there's nothing wrong with that. Targeting it to different people, because when you're building your business, when you're working with people, nothing wrong with having segregated marketing and having different things. So you can, again, you're identifying your target audience who you want to help and support through, I say, more trans inclusive marketing, and you're marketing deliberately into spaces where trans people are going to be, maybe support groups, maybe local LGBT drop-in centres, wherever it may be. So there's nothing wrong with having do different sorts of language. So again, having this sensitive approach to the needs of people who have effectively the same need, your support, going through menopause and that time of their life, but they need the language to be relevant and included for them, so they feel that inclusion. Yeah, think of that favourite coffee shop, nice sofa at the back, lovely bean, frothy latte. You can feel the world go by and you feel safe. That's what people want to feel. So let me talk about some lessons. It's only a couple more slides, and then we can get into questions and we can do some Q&A. So as you're aware, you're probably more an expert than this I am. The effects of menopause can start from people as early in their 20s, and in the same way puberty can start, progressive puberty can start pre-10. Menopause, perimenopause can kick in at any age as well, and even later in life. So we've got to recognise that different people could be going through different challenges, and it may well be impacted by testosterone supplements that transmasculine people have. They may also have had a hysterectomy at the time, so maybe they're not going through the same effects, but they may well have side effects such as osteoporosis or other issues if they haven't got enough testosterone in the system. Um, it, it can affect many different identities, not just the traditional XX. There'll be some XY people, and they're going through different challenges. And we can think about people like Casta Semenya, who, if you like, I believe she would describe herself as having diverse sexual characteristics, or DSDs, or intersex, as also known. So people can have maybe different characteristics of intersex, and may not be traditionally binary body parts. Yeah, that this person may well have a vagina and a womb, or testes, whatever it may be. There's various combinations there. So we've got to think about the identities we have. Even though people are maybe who may present to you in that way are less than 1% of the population in many cases, they do exist, and they feel excluded. They're kind of marginalised by the lack of inclusion. The language matters. How you talk to somebody, using the right pronouns, using the right coding. And what I mean by coding, I mean I can personally tell if you're talking to me and you believe I'm a man, or I can tell it if you're talking to me and you believe I'm a woman. The language, the way you talk to somebody, just the social constructs we have around interactions. I can tell if you think, I can tell a male-based conversation, I can tell a female-based conversation. So again, it really matters to somebody if they're presenting as a man, they're transmasculine. they want to be talked to as if they're a man. If they want to know where the toilet is, you want to point them to the gents down the corridor, not to the ladies. In fact, you want to make sure that your signage, if you have facilities, you're doing this in person, you make sure the signage is there as well. Yeah, and also, yeah, as I say, talk to them as a man. And if they're non-binary, I'm not sure how you talk to somebody who's non-binary, but you talk to them in a very open way that is not coded in particular gender. Avoid assumptions. I was doing a talk recently to the NHS, and the conversation came up about, should I ask every man if he could be pregnant? And my response was, well, if you don't, how do you know? They said, well, they're men. Well, that man may well be assigned female at birth. They may still be capable of bearing children. They may be having an active sexual relationship. So you cannot assume that this man may not be pregnant. Otherwise, what you do is you assume that every man is cis. And there are many trans men that you would not be able to tell the difference. So by assuming someone's a sex assigned at birth, you could be making some assumptions here. So again, without being invasive, it's important you identify some factors when you're helping people and supporting them. So yeah, whether you have a check sheet, whether you're asking, I'm assuming that if you are promoting yourself as a menopause coach or a menopause support, then the person coming to you will actually have a need for that support. So, but again, that's an assumption. You can't assume who their partners are, if they've had children, whatever it may be in life. So again, we've got to be really careful we're not making assumptions. And I think it's also important to be very person-centric, very, very holistic in your thinking about all these different identities I've talked about, the situation that person may be going through. We don't know who they are. We've got to make sure we're using language that's inclusive, do our fact-finding, build that relationship. If you're nervous about saying, oh, can I just check your pronouns? Start by sharing your pronouns. Hi, my name is Joanne. My pronouns are she and her. Nothing wrong with saying that. And by doing it to everybody, what you're doing is you're creating an inclusive space. Maybe you have a sign-up form. Maybe you have people when they come onto your service, they're signing up. Just put a box for pronouns. Don't make it mandatory. Just have it on the form somewhere. And if it's important to somebody, they will complete it. If it's not important, people can ignore it. It doesn't matter. So you're not being overly woke or discriminating against people who don't want to use pronouns. You're just saying, if it's important to you, have it there. And again, don't have. I've seen some people when they're creating these forms, they have gender or something on the form, and it will have male, female, non-binary, transmasculine, transfeminine, all these different genders listed. I would say just keep it simple. Male, female, non-binary, other, please describe, or something like that. And then if people can describe what they want to do, I for one would tick female. Unless I was having a prostate exam, then I might change my answer to be relevant to that situation, or may tick female and say, but I also have a prostate. A trans masculine person may say, well, I'm male, but I still have a womb and a cervix. So again, you can ask those sort of questions in that way, because obviously if you want a mammogram, I mean, men and women and non-binary people can all at risk of breast cancer, but cervical cancer, you kind of have to have a cervix. I don't have a cervix, therefore the cervical cancer screening is not for me, but prostate screening is for me. So think about all these considerations and the impact that menopause may have on all the symptoms you're well aware of, the side effects, the sweats, the itching, the brain fog, everything you know about menopause already can affect people in different ways. So we've got to be really holistic here and not make the assumptions. Okay, so just kind of wrap this up before questions. So the reflection the challenge I'm giving you here is how are you going to think, feel, and act differently? So I don't know how long I've been talking for 20 minutes. So think about how you're going to think, feel, and act differently, because right now I want to just move the needle a bit. So turn this from being an interesting talk, well, hopefully it's been interesting, into some sort of action. So what's going on in your mind? What's going on when you're feeling, and what's going on when you think, how am I going to take action? So action changes things. If we don't take action, nothing moves, nothing changes, everything stays the same. So maybe part of the Q&A, maybe we can do a quick share about something that's woken you up and got the light bulb, and what's made you think. Okay, so let's have a look. There we are. Questions. Let me put me back to big mode.
So, food for thought. For some people, I know this is going to be like, yeah, right, okay, get it. Other people are going to be going, whoa, oh, okay. That's a lot more to think about. And you know what? It doesn't matter what end of the spectrum you're in. I think that the fact that you're here, if you're watching live or replay, the fact is that this is real and this is part of, if you choose to be part of your thinking going forward. And I would obviously strongly encourage it because otherwise, you have 4 grad sessions. I am very selective about who I have in the grad sessions, and I wouldn't invite someone like Joe if I didn't think this was really fundamentally important for you to think about. And no matter what you do and how you position yourself, it also helps you start to think about inclusivity, period. Um, and people don't work with you unless they feel like they trust you, they know you, they like you, they trust you, they belong in your space and the community that you're creating. And you get to choose who your community is. And no one has any right to tell you what that is or isn't. But this just gives you another way, another lens to look at everything through. So, Holly, I'm going to come straight to you.
First off, thank you so much, Joanne, because this is great. And it's really timely because when I was putting together something last week, I was trying to put together something in the vein of that this is universal. And I was trying to figure out what is the language that is inclusive. I was like, is it everybody is born with ovaries? And I was struggling to kind of figure out what that was. And so this is really helpful. Would you say that to say that you were assigned female at birth feels like the most inclusive way to kind of put the umbrella around that? Or
The problem with that phraseology is it's not everyday language. It's we've got to think about linguistics that work in in everyday society, and that often it can come across if someone has a less than positive view of trans people, it sounds very complex and triggers people into going, hang on a minute, I don't like this language. I would stick to sort of more basics. And, are you experiencing symptoms of perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause? Are you of a certain stage of life where hormone imbalance or whatever you want, however you want to describe that phrase, is impacting your sense of self and well-being through yeah again I don't know have the best language there, but I would try and describe it in that way. Hormone imbalance, have your periods stop, have you, do you have a womb, etc., etc. If you want to use ovaries, if that makes sense, whatever you think is the significant factor. But I think using sex assigned at birth isn't everyday language for 90% of the population. And you may find that people go, what's that about? If you're trying to make inclusive language, I think if you just keep to perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, hormone imbalances or hormone changes in later life or at the stage of life are you experiencing these symptoms? Yeah, could this be you type thing? I would suggest that. But if you want to do targeted mail shots, if you like, at people who are in the trans plus community, then yeah, use assigned male at birth, use assigned female at birth, because that would then hit people who are non-binary as well. And I think that would maybe resonate within the community, but wouldn't necessarily resonate outside of the community. That would be my suggestion.
that makes sense. I think the nuance here was that I was trying to make sure that women or anyone that is going to go through this realizes they're going to go through it, because I feel like I was trying to hit on the fact that nobody's getting out alive. We're all going through it. And so it's good to be informed, because I was talking about people seeing the M factor, and I was trying to make sure that people understood that it was valuable information to them, even if they didn't think that it pertained to their life, say a 35-year-old or 36-year-old. So that's kind of what I was trying to be like, you're all going to go through it. You should all like get informed kind of thing. Not quite so.
What you might find is that there are the vast swathes of the population. When you talk about trans people, they think purely trans women, assigned male at birth, trans women. And you hear all this rhetoric about why are these men taking our products? Why are we pandering to men and giving them HRT? Why are we pandering to men and worrying about their periods? it's all part of their fantasy. What they're doing is they're missing the fact that we're talking here about transmasculine people who are assigned female at birth, or non-binary people, and they're latching onto the fact that trans people are men, you know, at birth, and that so you may well get people pushing back at you saying, well, why are you worried about these predatory men doing this? Actually, I'm caring about people assigned female at birth who have a cervix, who have a womb, who have ovaries, going through this hormone imbalance or hormone changes, creating these symptoms. So yeah, it's just thinking about, so again, the language that you're going to get pushback on is potentially from people who don't understand or have a blinkered view of who trans people are.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Joe. Valeria?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Joanne. Probably what I will ask is for you might be kind of ignorance, and probably it is that as a psychologist and a personal-centered that you are mentioning now being personal-centered approach, and that was where I start. But now with menopause, it's my what I knew, not here. I live in Greece, so I don't know trans people here, but in Brazil I do. But I never talk with them about that. So if a trans person now, let's say trans feminine or trans masculine, they go for HRT in my mind. Now, so they control their hormones. And how and what I my small knowledge about menopause is because at the levels of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone goes down. But if a person, whatever which age is, and if it's trans, in my mind, she or he was going through a check with her hormones. So I
Yeah.
cannot,
Let me give you a
contact.
scenario. Let me give
Yeah,
you a
I'm
scenario.
sorry.
So if I have to have significant surgery, they will require me to stop taking estrogen for at least 2 to 3 weeks ahead of that surgery
Oh,
to avoid risk of blood clots and other things. I mean, I appreciate most of that tends to be linked to oral tablet estrogen and gel estrogen or topical estrogen. I don't think it has the same complications, but they basically tell you to stop taking estrogen ahead of surgery. So I would likely go through a version of menopause at that
right,
point
right.
until I'm allowed to take it, which could be 4 weeks. So I may well have challenges there. I don't know to what extent. I've got friends who've had surgery and been through this. Also, you get supply issues. You go on holiday, you run out. There's a whole lot of things. You know, we know that patches are in short supply from time to time. And so there are problems where people or their GP stops prescribing for some reason. You know, or maybe they elect to detransition, so they may go through this phase of having to have withdrawal symptoms while they're waiting for their testosterone to kick back in, or whatever it may be. So there are scenarios where trans people may end up having a depleted estrogen level or testosterone level. That they may not have access to it for whatever reason. Osteoporosis may kick in. You know, if you suddenly stop me from taking estrogen because I take powerful testosterone blockers, which are the ones that you use for prostate cancer. I have injections every 12 weeks. I can't recover my testosterone overnight. It just won't come back. And I've been on blockers for like 8 or 9 years. I doubt the machinery works anymore. Or if it does, it will take a while to come back. So I think of a certain stage in life, I'm at a certain stage in life now where having a lack of estrogen in my body would cause me extreme discomfort mentally, and also the psychological and physical changes that are going to come with it as well. Does that help?
Yeah. But yeah, for a certain period, because in my mind, if you're trans, you're going to do whatever it takes, to be in balance with your hormones. But I understand that.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, testosterone and estrogen are prescription only drugs, if you want to call them drugs or hormones. You can't buy them over the counter. You
Yeah.
could lie and get maybe emergency contraception and use them and get them that way, but or you can go online and potentially prescribe them yourself, or con somebody into believing it. But it's all very risky. So yeah, it's, if you want, I mean, probably like anybody in this room, you want to know you've got continuity of supply, and as soon as you haven't, you start getting nervous, and I get very nervous when I hear there's an HRT shortage and I'm busy hoarding like everybody else is.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
It's a lot to think about, right? I mean, I met Joanne a few years ago, like several years ago, more than a few years ago, and actually it was back in Nationwide, my old employer. I think when we first met, Joe, and there is a real mind shift change when any new topic comes into your life. And if that's menopause, if that's transgender, if that's whatever it happens to be, if it's a topic you've not been familiar with in the past, it takes time to disseminate this information. And it takes time to think about the different scenarios where it might have an impact or intersection with the work that you're doing or you're going to do, or how you're going to market yourself, how you're going to put yourself out there. But I just thought this was a really valuable session because the world's moving fast and AI is moving fast, and a lot of what we're working with and what I'm presenting in the diploma is very factual, very research based, and it lacks sometimes. I don't think the work we are doing lacks it, but I think sometimes we can lack the kind of real life crossover between what we're learning and how we're applying it. And depending where you want to go and what you want to do, I think that, this is why with the grad sessions are so important, because it's about expanding your mind even further than we did during the diploma. So yeah, I'm just so excited to share this with you and to introduce you to Joe. And Sarah, you've got your hand up next.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Joanne. So I was just putting together my presentation, as I mentioned earlier, and one of the things I wanted to talk about was, that the eggs in the fetus that we have that, dissipates over time. And I did have initially the fetus, assigned female at birth, and now I'm thinking, oh no, maybe I shouldn't use that. So I will definitely rethink that. Thank you. And my question is around in the UK, are you finding that people that are going through these transitions, are they predominantly going via the NHS, or are they predominantly going private? Is it mixed? Just to give us an idea of the landscape and the type of kind of, if they wanted to get advice on menopause treatments, do you say, okay, go back to your primary care provider, or is it something where actually maybe they'd be better off going with somebody in the private sector? Do you find that it's caught up equally
Yeah.
on both sides?
Let me give you a sort of a view of the landscape of the trans support in the NHS system. This is a UK perspective only. Just picking up on a bit about assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth. I'm not saying it's the wrong language. If you're talking within the trans LGBTQ plus community, it's most definitely the right language. It's just not common language if you step out of that echo chamber. That's all I say. If you're trying to advertise it to mass market, people are going to look at you and go, what does that mean? You mean you? Because we'll have the people who will say, you're born a boy, you are a boy. You're born a girl, you are a girl. Yeah, there's no. That's the world. So you'll end up with a few of those. So what you don't want to do is turn everybody off. So you've got to try and find that language that kind of enhances your brand on one side, but doesn't turn off the other part of your brand as well. So it's just, that's the sticky thing here, which is why I think you need to maybe have two different strands of brand if you're trying to appeal both ways and make sure the brand is inclusive enough. so that you can swap when someone's interested. You can say, okay, I need to talk to you in a different way. But yeah, that's the complexity. But yeah, okay. So going back to the NHS, so we have primary care, so GP networks. My first point of contact with my GP was 2016. I was having a bit of a nervous breakdown. I needed some support. It was actually my wife who booked the appointment, said, go and see the GP. So I trotted off there, sat in front of me, said, what's the matter? I said, I think I'm trans, and just poured it out. He then, bless him, was absolutely amazing. Cancelled his diary. I don't know what happened to all the patients in the waiting room, but I was in there an hour and a half, and we talked. And he said, "Okay, I understand," and he gave me great support. And then he referred me to the gender identity clinic. So this is back in 2016, and my wait was around 18 months. That back in 2018, I believe the wait now to see an NHS funded gender identity clinic for adult services is around 3 to 4 years for your first appointment. In order to get a second appointment, that's probably another year to 18 months after that. The general rule, and I'm generalizing, not with anecdotal evidence, is you very rarely get prescribed cross-sex hormones or anything proactive on the first appointment. Yeah, no matter what you hear in the press about people having their breasts removed after a quick chat, it just doesn't happen. Yeah, you have to go through a lot of gatekeeping, a lot of convincing. The gender identity clinics expect you to do the heavy lift first. You can't just turn up and say, I'm a woman, give me hormones. You have to say, where's the evidence? Have you changed your name? Have you done this? Have you show me some evidence? So there's some due diligence. There's informed consent. There's all this kind of stuff going on. So there is no fast track. Yes, there are private clinics. I don't know the names of all of them. I can't remember them. There's a few in London. There's a few around the country. So you can pay privately. Typically, I think it's £250, £300 for a consultation. Then you pay for private prescriptions and you pay for hormones privately. So you have to have a certain level of wealth in order to be able to do that. But you can get some quick attention or quicker
Okay,
attention.
thank you. And
Not-
so if you go down the private route, they can't then transition into the NHS for the prescriptions. Is that
Right.
correct?
There's something called shared care agreements. So some GPs will enter into a shared care agreement with a private prescriber, a private service. There are some private prescribers who are GP friendly, and there are some that are most certainly not. So if you're with one of the nots, Gender GP being one of them, they were very popular. In fact, I used Gender GP when I first transitioned and had a shared care agreement with my doctor through them. They're persona non grata now. They are basically off the list. They're based in Singapore, not based in the UK anymore. So your GP may well enter a shared care agreement. So I went through the GIC, the Gender Identity Clinic, which was it tertiary, secondary care, whatever the level is. So my GP effectively has a shared care agreement with the Gender Identity Clinic. So the Gender Identity Clinic are responsible for my blood levels and the endocrinology side. And my GP is responsible for prescribing, with the Gender Identity Clinic being the overseer of my care. So if my GP gets out of his depth, he can always refer back to the gender clinic and say, Joe's bloods are like this. Is that okay? And they go, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. So yeah, it's always a partnership. So the GP will do it in partnership with somebody else. And it's a postcode lottery, or even down to a GP lottery, of whether your GP feels competent to, is positive about doing that or not. Because there are many GPs who just go, it's all too complicated, I don't want to do this, and they walk away, and then you're left finding somebody else. It gets worse if you're below the age of 18. In fact, actually below the age of 25 now, after the cash report, it becomes quite tricky. The young people's gender services shut down. The Tavistock and Portman shut down following the Kira Bell case, and they're just starting back up again. But there's a huge restriction on hormone prescriptions, and they're looking to do trials, and it's all kind of a bit of a mess. So if you're a young person, the likelihood of you getting adequate NHS or even private support is is 4, 5, 6 years, and many people actually become an adult before they get through the young person's care services. So at the age of 18, you automatically get flipped across and the clock restarts. So that's some of the challenges. But there's a lot of gatekeeping. If you mention you've got mental health concerns, if you've got bad acne, for example, they just go, can't touch you. They put all these barriers in your way. I know many young people who said that they've got mental health concerns, attempted suicide, and that's a big warning flag. Rather than being we need to help you, they go, oh, if you have a mental health need, we need to sort that out first, not treat it with hormones. So quite
So
complex.
thank you for sharing. Yeah, because in '99 I had a class that looked at some efforts in Holland to offer operations before the child went into puberty if someone was very young and already claiming that just so that their body wasn't going against them, or feeling that their body was turning against them. And yeah, I don't know if they're still doing those kinds of things in Holland now, but yeah, it's quite complicated. And I had a friend who went through it. But everything kicked off with COVID and it became very complicated and they had to go private. And yeah, it was it was a bit of a mess. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience.
But there will be people who are born with an intersex or diverse or DSD, non-traditional hormones, chromosomes pairs. They may not even be aware that they are intersex condition. So they may externally present as female, but have undescended testes, no womb, and they don't find out. Many people don't find out until they attempt childbirth or conceiving a family. And there are people who would effectively perceive themselves to be male with a penis, but maybe they were operated on at a very early age, and the traces of the female anatomy were surgically altered. And again, because of the stigma that parents go through, they may well not have shared with that with the child. So the child again only realizes there's a problem with their genetics at a point where they're trying to start a family, and so that there could be people out there who are going through perimenopausal symptoms who are completely unaware that they have an internal female anatomy.
Yeah, and I think that was something that really came home to me. So back after I graduated at university when I was 19, I did a postgrad in hotel management. So completely different from my psychology degree, but it was just a way to earn some money at the time because it was a paid internship slash postgraduate opportunity. And I was taken aside one day when I was working in reception. Bearing in mind that I'm 19, I've lived away from home for 3 years. I'm back at home now. And the general manager says to me, there's a woman checking in today who's intersex, and you must not use he, she, or her with them. No explanation, no understanding, no idea what the heck this was supposed to mean, completely ignorant. And no one actually turned around and said to me, this is the person when they're checking in. I was just left on shift to kind of hopefully get the names right. So everyone that checked in that day, I didn't use their name. I didn't use the he, she, her, miss, her, sir, ma'am, anything at all. I was just like, welcome to McDonald's Hotel. How may I help you today? And it felt really awkward because it was such a topic at 19 I'd never ever come across before. And since then, what I've learned is that any child that is born, that the surgeon or the person that delivers, the midwife, whoever it is that delivers that child, that baby, if there's any indication, and Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but everything I've learned, indication that someone is, just checking my microphone there, that it is intersex, that the parent is presented with the decision to make pretty much immediately, do you want this baby to be male or female? And then they do the corresponding surgery there and then, if they're aware of it. And that's not always the case, but so it is.
Joe. We've moved on a long way. I mean, if you go back 10, 15, 20 years, and before that, it was a case of, it was FGM or MGM. It was that people were basically making decisions on people's behalf about what they believed would be the best outcome, and it was basically on a visual assessment of which genitals looked dominant. But going back further, it was basically men were good, women were bad. Therefore, the parents wanted the child to become male. So it was almost like steered in that direction that many young women effectively were assigned male because people believed that male was better. So what they're trying to do is determine what your best outcome is. Things have progressed a lot now. Again, I'm not a medical professional, but my belief is that unless it's life saving or critically important, i.e., blocked urethra or something that's going to stop that person having any quality of life, then surgical intervention is not done at that point. In the past, there was a lot of shame around parents. My child's not perfect. My child's got this. So there's this propensity to want to fix the defect, if you like. And I think as a society, again, we've moved on a lot. But I'm not a surgeon. I'm not a doctor. I'm not in that space. So I can only talk from what I believe. I can't speak from position of fact here.
No, and I think that's really valid. I think that, I was at an event about 3 weeks ago where someone who was intersex had shared their journey and shared their statistics or shared statistics since they were born, but they were our age, well, they were in their 50s. And I think perhaps there was a skew. I think like many people will do when they're sharing their story, they want, it's a bit like what is it? When you're looking for the evidence to back up your argument. So I think there's perhaps some of that going on as well. Confirmation bias, that's the expression I was looking for. Joe, I've got a question for you. So we have a very prominent GP who works in our space who is pushing the boundaries of prescribing and is perhaps on one hand pushing women's health beyond where we are right now, perhaps on the other hand, prescribing beyond, well, we know prescribing beyond what research can evidence, but perhaps we just don't have the research to evidence. And I'm just writing down, I'd written down earlier while you were chatting, one of the things she does, and she caveats everything that she says, is that women, and she's very strongly uses women in everything that she says and does, but she says, but we recognize other people, transgender, non-binary, gender questioning people will or may go through menopause. And I'm just curious about what your kind of gut reaction to that kind of language for someone who's very predominant in the menopause field to kind of go, we're going to use women, we're only going to talk about women, only going to use that language. We know there are other people going through it, but this is how we're going to position ourselves. And I was just curious if you had any thoughts or comments on that.
I don't set out to police anybody's language. I'm not the inclusion police. It's not for me to judge. But what I would say is there's clearly a gap in the market for someone who's going to have different language. So if that's her lane, that's her brand. Let her get on with it, and let's find someone else who has a different perspective and a different language, and amplify them as well. So you're getting another view. So you do what you do, and if you want to do it your way, do it your way. If you want to do it a different way, then there's a gap in the market. Go for it. I'd say I don't want to sit here and tell anybody what they can think, do, or say. Only that you should think before you do act and say. That's all I would ask you to do is think about the impact. And if the impact doesn't bother you, I'm not going to change that. This person clearly, being a leader in their field, must be well aware of the language they're using and why they're using it, and they're never going to change their mind. I'm sure you can't there's no point having an argument with them. So I would say, do it your way and have your own message. And if everything we've covered tonight isn't you're not comfortable with, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just be aware that the impact we've talked about. There may be some people out there who feel excluded by you or don't feel they can trust you. Which is, if you can live with that, then maybe signpost them to somebody else who has a different service. You say, actually, you're not my speciality. I've got a friend or a colleague or someone I've been through the training with. I can thoroughly recommend them that they specialise in trans support. Let me signpost them to you.
Yeah. You see why I invited Joe to work with us tonight, right? I work with a lot of the transgender community, and I've worked in some very, very large scale global organizations or bodies that are like overseeing bodies for law or overseeing bodies for financial services or overseeing bodies for different different industries. And I'm the kind of menopause go-to guru. And I remember clearly sitting on one committee where I was delivering a complimentary menopause champion training to all the industry leaders. Now, we're talking about people from some of the world's largest financial services, legal firms, etc. And there were a lot of people there, and we had a few people on screen because they couldn't be there in London. And this was global. And I took everyone through knowing what I know, knowing the best that I know, and always positioning everything that I do as you know that I do. This is the best. This is what I know. It's an evolving space. We're learning all the time. And there's much we don't know that we still have to learn. And I remember being absolutely lambasted by the trans man that was on the call because of the language I was using and because of how I was positioning things. And I remember coming away from the call and I remember having Joe's voice in my head and going, no, I did the best I could do on the day. And I invited them to have a conversation with me. And I said, look, I really want to learn because I only know what I know, and it's a journey. And I'd really love you to come and have a conversation with me and help me unpick what I presented, what I said that was offensive, and why you feel that you can no longer engage with me or with, I don't want to say the organ, like with the umbrella body, because I don't want to be the reason you no longer communicate with them, because there's so many other incredible benefits to you being part of their community outside of menopause. Would not engage with me because I'd been, in their eyes, I've been so incredibly offensive. And to this day, I still don't know what I did. But I think I'm only sharing that because I believe that you can only do the best you can do with the knowledge that you've got. But I always invite you to be curious. I always invite you to go out there and find out and ask and genuinely be curious and learn and learn and learn, because it's a never evolving landscape. And even when I was in the States, as you know, in May, I was walking along New Jersey shore. I was with my friend. Well, you've all met Jen. And Jen does a session on confidence. She's a former New York lawyer, very senior, and she does a confidence session. And we were walking along New Jersey shore. We're having a conversation. I was talking about LGBTQ plus. Right, we're just talking acronyms and what does it mean over there? What does it mean over here? We're having that conversation. She goes, Q, what's Q? I went, queer. She goes, can't say queer. Don't say queer out loud. Can't say queer in America. I was like, okay, tell me a bit more about that. And we got into this massive conversation about what that meant to her, what that meant to her community, what it meant more generally. And I thought, isn't it amazing that depending what circles you're moving in, different language is going to work different. So you always have to be true to yourself and to be doing what you feel is right for you. But hopefully I'm giving you as much input and access to people who I believe are experts in their field and are the go-to people for knowledge and information in this space. Um, Joe, I'm so super excited to
Uh,
finally have gotten together and had you meet some of my, albeit tiny, tiny
Can I just
group.
add one more thing in there? So
Yeah, please.
I can't remember how explicit I was at the beginning, but often when I'm doing training around gender identity, I start off by explaining who I am through what my lens is, how I see the world, and through my own lived experience. So I'm nearly 60, I'm married, I transitioned 10 years ago, trans woman, so I'm male at birth. So I give you my perspective of why I think things. And what I'll always try and do is say, I don't speak for everybody. I speak for me. This is my lens. I'm not transmasculine. I'm not non-binary. I don't know how those people experience life or how experience their. So I don't try and talk for anybody else. I talk through my lens. I try and talk with an educated lens where I have a lot of perspectives, but they're just perspectives. They're not always fact. And then what I also try and do is encourage people to, if you've heard the equation E plus R equals O, so an encounter plus a reaction equals an outcome. So basically, the reaction is based on how we perceive something. I perceive an encounter, therefore the outcome is going to be based on my perception and how I react. So what we can try and do is avoid talking about what I believe. If we can talk about why I believe something, my frame of reference, why I believe that, and by pre-declaring why I believe something, then at least people will call me out and say, actually, that's not the right language. You're right. I hadn't thought about that. That's not my lived experience. Now you've shared that from your perspective. I get that. Thank you. So again, that ultimate recognizing that the impact, intent, impact, and accountability. My intent was good, but intent only takes you so far. You've got to then think about how that impact lands on somebody else, and then you've got to be accountable. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. That wasn't what I meant. Now you've said that, I really get that. Sorry, yeah. Let me learn from that. And so if you think about those things, about how you can, intent, impact, and accountability, and then E+R=O, and think about the why, but also recognize that you've got to have a plan B in your back pocket. If I upset someone or get it wrong, what's my response? The NHS response is radical candor. I'm sorry, whatever you said, we're sorry, doesn't matter. Airlines actually fix it. They're not just sorry, they actually make sure it doesn't happen in the first place. The NHS does mess up and then say sorry for all the time, or fight back, or lie, or cover things up, whatever they do. Anyway, but yeah, think about if you're unsure, say why you believe something, and understand it's a perspective, not a fact.
Really, really great positioning. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts, questions, or feedback from today's session?
Sent Lauren a copy of the slides, which has a QR code in there, and I've got some bonus content about some trans resources which I can let you have. And I've also sent Lauren an AI. So last time I ran the session at the IGPP a few months ago, I recorded it and I fed it through the transcript through AI, and I created a workbook from that, which has got loads of analysis and the 5 whys, critical thinking applied to some of the topics. So again, it'll give you something to deep dive into and have a look through. Again, it's give you some logic rather than emotion to play with.
And actually, that's a big learning point for you as well. So we both spoke at that event, and you did all of that. I just got up on stage and spoke and sat back down, and then got changed very quickly out of my dress into my sweatpants because I had another session afterwards. But when you are going on stage and doing stuff, if you can get someone to record, or you can record what you're doing, then that can be really helpful on a number of levels, which we're not going to go into today. But yeah, I thought that was a really big learning curve for me as well. So Joanne, as ever, I was always learning from you, and I appreciate your time today and everything that you do. Thank you very, very much.
No problem.